So we're gonna do a little meal afterwards. You may not have known that. You're invited for lunch. Okay? So we're gonna have a little lunch, and here's partly why. It's not gonna be that long, but we're gonna celebrate a little bit. I started writing down a couple days ago things that God had done in the 5 years. It's like, oh, I forgot about that. I forgot about so many things. It's just like amazing. And then so we're going to recount some of those, and we're going to look ahead a little bit. What might God do? We get to 5 years, there's a lot more. So we're going to talk about that later. But interesting, when I'm thinking through these texts, I prepared this thinking about this word, but there's some things, I'll let you make some connections, that I was thinking about for us later in terms of what it might be uniquely for Converge Community Church. So it was just kind of interesting. So is this week 5, I think, in this series on a people meant for God. So some of you have been here sometimes. Some have been here pretty much all the time. What we're trying to do in 13 weeks is show how the whole story of the Bible hangs together. So a lot of people get confused by that. They just don't know how it fits, and we're trying to do that. So that means between Pastor Mike and myself, we're preaching some like really long sections, which is challenging for you too. But and when we do that, sometimes I'll tell part of the Scripture, and sometimes we'll read part of the Scripture. So this is not normally what we do. Normally we're taking one passage, stay in that passage, so this is a little different rhythm. But let me do this and take a pause and just say, what's the big story? What's the big story? So the big story is this, from beginning to end. Our very first message, and you can go online and see it, we talked about from Genesis to Revelation. And here's what we know about us. Okay? You and I, human beings, we are unique in all of creation. We're made in God's image. There's a unique way in which we have this connection with God, this thing inside of us that's meant for Him. So in you, when you see and feel things that aren't right in the world, that's actually of God. That is, you're supposed to have that sense. And when there's a longing for things to be right, that's also God placed. That's being made in His image. Now, in the end of this, we saw it in Revelation, there's going to be a day when all the wrong is right and there are no tears. So I don't know what that exactly means, except there's no tears. Does that mean I don't remember bad? Or does it mean that it's so good that those things, they're like so distant? I think it's something of that. And so we live in the in-between of all this. There's a lot of hard stuff. So since chapter 3 of Genesis, when Adam and Eve turned away from God, sin's entered the world, and it's brought a corruption just like it's all around us. Think about the things that have occurred since we met last nationally, locally, the loss, the pain, Las Vegas, Vinny Lauricella, who was here, dying of a heart attack on Sunday. Think of that family as we pray for them. The loss that you've experienced just in a week. Man, we long for that, don't we? We long for that. Even their sin, there's a hint of that. What the Lord says to them, it's from your seed that's going to crush the serpent's head. Someone's going to crush that evil someday. We saw it when He called Abram. We saw it when He called Abram, I'm going to make you. Okay, think about Abram. The guy's 100 years old. I mean, the guy's way past childbearing. He can't. His wife can't. God said, I'm going to pick you. I'm going to make a nation from you that's going to bless nations. You know how it's gospel. The one that's going to come from you is going to be this one that's going to be on the cross later. It's going to bless the peoples of the earth. We saw it later on in David when He called out David as a king. David was not deserving of this. We remember his incredible falling, but God's faithful to His promise to David from your seed, and we see God's mercy and grace on a child, Solomon, from David and Bathsheba later. That's Messiah to come. All this is pointing to Christ. So we see in all this stuff is, you know what? We're messed up as a people. We need Him. And God's going to do it. God's going to do it. So everybody walks in here with brokenness, with sin that's happened to us, our own, and a huge need for God who loves us and a Savior like this. We'll see aspects of that in today's story. So today's story, what's taking place, here's where we are in the story. Israel is a nation. Don't you get tired of the rebellion? How many times, can you guys just get it? They just keep turning away. And it's generation after generation. But God has always kept somebody, a people for himself. Okay? We experience the same things here. But what's taken place in their history is God sent the Babylonian Empire to come and judge them, and they know it. They are taken off as captives. The temple, the very place that they were to meet with God, that was their glory days. We got a building. God's going to meet with us here. That place was destroyed. It was rubble. It's gone. And the leaders were taken. So if you know the story of Daniel, Daniel's taken captive. Daniel's a teenager. Probably his parents are executed. So he's an orphan taken off to Babylon 500-700 miles away. That's where he lives. It's a sad period in Israel's history. The whole land's devastated. The only guys left back in Judea, it's the poor. The people got nothing. That's who's left. And they're living in rubble. What's God going to do? What's he going to do? That's these books, Ezra and Nehemiah and Esther. So anybody get lost in timelines? Can I get lost? Thanks, Mike. Get lost in timelines. So what I'm going to try to do next is just give you an outline of how these books work, just in sequence. So for your own reading, how that, I'm going to try to do it visually with that. So the time period when Jerusalem falls and they're devastated is 586 BC. That's when Babylon comes in. So if you know the story of Daniel, which might be next week when we do the prophets, Daniel is a very interesting man. He serves 4 different kings. Babylonian kings. The Babylonian Empire is defeated by the Persians. He serves them all. So think of being a young man, living through all the stages, young man to old man. He serves these pagan kings, unswervingly, sometimes risking his life. So that's in that time period. The Persians defeat the Babylonians. Daniel's still there. So the book of Ezra happens about 50 years after that. So that's when the first wave of exiles return to Jerusalem. And we'll see that in this book. That's actually chapters 1 through 6 in Ezra. But Ezra's not involved. He's just telling the story. So there's a gap between Ezra 6 and Ezra 7 as you read that. Let me read, I'm just going to do this first. So let me read the first 2 verses of Ezra. It's very interesting. All right, so I know I'm going fast. If you have a Bible and can follow, someone give me a page number. Ezra, where are we at? Anybody? If you open up the table of contents, it'll tell you. I should have done this up here. What is it? 249? Okay, 249. So you can kind of follow along. I'm going to read the first 2 verses. It's a very interesting thing said there. So I'm going to read stuff sometimes. I'm going to tell you the background story. In the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom, which he put in writing, and said, "Thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he's charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah." All right, think about that for a second. That's Cyrus, who's a pagan king. How does he know about the prophet Jeremiah? He's acknowledging the Lord, the God of heaven. Okay, these guys they're used to these little provincial gods, God of the earth, or God of the harvest, God of the sun, God of the fly, whatever, little gods. Demons, really. The Lord, the God of heaven has done that. How's he know this? Hint? How's he know it? Come on. Who? Daniel. Daniel's there. Daniel's been serving all these kings. Daniel's an old man. This is the end. Daniel continues serving faithfully. He's telling Cyrus about the prophecy. How would this guy know 500-700 miles away about any of this? But what he tells him, Cyrus sees the Lord's done this. Cyrus recognizes God's sovereign hand in placing him as a ruler, and then in rebuilding the temple that had been destroyed. They'd been destroyed by the Babylonians. So you can read more about the details of that. It's crazy that he issues that verdict, but it comes from Daniel. So, okay, not only does he issues it to be rebuilt, but here's what he does. Okay, like when when Nebuchadnezzar, 50 years earlier, had destroyed the temple, he takes all the instruments, the gold instruments, out of it. Well, it's in the royal treasury, and Cyrus says, take them all back. Rebuild it there. It's interesting, a couple different times, I think it's Darius later on when he does this, he wants the Jewish people who serve the Lord, the God of heaven, to pray for him. Just interesting. I don't know that these guys become saved, but they recognize something of those people and their God. So next would be the book of Esther, which I'm not gonna read this one. Just read Esther. It's a great story. Some of you guys know it. It's embedded in, so it's actually between chapters 6 and 7 of Ezra. And this is the story of one person who risked their life, a woman. She's actually in the king's harem, many women, but she risks her life on behalf of a nation. It's an incredible story. Her uncle, a couple of the verses or phrases that we remember, her uncle Mordecai comes to her and says this, and who knows whether you've not come to the kingdom for such a time as this, meaning this, Esther, you got a point in this spot. God did that. He put you there. Who knows if it's not for a time like this? She considers that at the risk of her life. So she's going to approach the king without being asked, which was unthinkable in their culture. And she's supposed to be executed. But she's going to appeal to the king because someone's trying to exterminate her people. He's got all kinds of wives. Who cares? So she says in response to that, then I will go to the king, though it's against the law. And if I perish, I perish. She's submitted under the sovereign hand of God. No spoilers. You got to read it. It's only 10 chapters. I'm not going to tell you the rest. That's in the middle. I'm just doing timeline. Okay, now we're actually in chapter 7 of Ezra. So there's a gap. Esther happens between 6 and 7. This is when a second group of exiles, second wave, returns to Jerusalem. Now this is with Ezra, who's he's a scribe of the law. So he goes back. We'll tell that story in a little bit. Followed by about 13 years later is Nehemiah going back in 445 BC. Nehemiah goes back. He's not a religious guy in terms of his profession. He's actually, well, some of you guys are builders. You could say he's a builder or a project manager. Actually, that's not his first vocation. But he goes back. They rebuild the temple wall, not the wall of the city, to protect them. Okay, this is that people. If you didn't have a wall around your city, people are going to come and wipe you out. So that's what he does. That's the timeline. Okay, anybody? Was that mildly helpful to anybody? Time frame? Anybody care? Okay. It just helps how that all, when I was reading, I go, oh, that's how that fits together. It's hard for me sometimes to see how everything fits together. So what I'm going to do now is walk through pretty quickly the book of Ezra and the book of Nehemiah. I'm going to tell certain parts, and I'm going to read certain parts. I think the parts I'm going to read are they're good ones to underline, and I don't have them in your worship guide, so there might be some things, but I'm going to try to note words and things that I think are pretty significant that kind of tell the story along. And we're going to pause, like thinking about us in that, okay? So I already read chapter 1. Let me pause now. I'm going to ask God's help. Okay, let's just pause. God, I know this has always been a lot, and you're a lot. I pray this. You know everybody here, and I pray that you would have on every single person, you would have land on them, their heart and their mind, what you want to communicate about you and about them. And you do the work that you want. Thank you. Amen. Okay. So I already mentioned the beginning. Chapter 3 of Ezra. I'm just going to keep flipping pages. That's basically talking about how they're rebuilding the altar, the foundation of the temple, and what happens as they begin to rebuild. They experience very significant opposition. The people of that land didn't want them there. So who's the people of that land? So here's what would happen with ancient kingdoms all the time. So one king would come in, he would wipe out or take over this area, he'd wipe out and take over this area. So he'd take people from this area who had survived, transplant them, then place them to this area. Why? He disrupted their lives as he's going to rule over all these kingdoms to prevent future rebellion. So the enemies there around Jerusalem were people that they didn't grow up there. They had lived somewhere else. Their generations have been wiped out. They're displaced. And they don't want the Jews to rebuild here, is what's happening. Significant opposition. So I'm going to read chapter 4, verses 4 through 6. Then the people of the land discouraged the people of Judah and made them afraid to build and bribed their counselors against them to frustrate their purpose all the days of Cyrus the king of Persia, even until the reign of Darius king of Persia. And in the reign of Ahasuerus, in the beginning of his reign, they wrote an accusation against the inhabitants of Judah and Jerusalem. What do we see? 3 different kings. This wasn't short opposition. This is generations of opposition. You think you got trouble in your life? This is generations of opposition. Trying to discourage them, trying to make them afraid, actually bribing counselors to frustrate them from carrying this out, even going so far as to write an accusation, a false one, against them. They are relentless to the point that we see later in chapter 4, there's actually a stop work order that's issued for them. Stop. Wait a minute, Cyrus had said we could do this. We read that one. Cyrus saw himself appointed by God to do this. Now there's a stop work order. What's that mean? When does God's work? What's that mean? It's a stop. So I'm going to just pause for a second. I want you to think about the stops, the obstacles in your life. Now this is a unique kind of one. Every story is not the same. I'm not trying to say that. But here's something that appears. God's called this forward, and there's a stop. What do you do when you get an obstacle? Is God closing a door on you? He could be. I mean, God closes doors. He could be. Is there something else? Could be that too. Let me ask you this. Who opens closed doors? Who opens doors that you can't open? Who opens doors when they are chained and they are locked? Remember Paul and Silas in jail? Earthquake comes, God does that. There's stuff we can't do. God does all the time, and when he wants to, he will. So I would say this, that a closed door, it may be a redirection, but I would say this, you keep asking God. Particularly if you sense it's something that God has put on your life, that it's in that category, it's a call of God, I would suggest to you, keep on knocking, keep on asking. You can't open it. And if it's God's, he will. There are times when closed doors are simply Satan's obstacles, but do not be discouraged, okay? Don't. God will demonstrate himself, if that's what it is. He will. And that's what happens here. Chapter 5, what we see, verses 1 and 2, the prophets come. It says the prophets were with them and supporting. The prophets of God are proclaiming the word of God to them to encourage them. Keep on. Keep on. Well, there's another significant letter of opposition that's sent to King Darius in middle of chapter 5. And they're accused of betrayal. And the Jews, in the response to that is this. Listen, this is very interesting. They're so honest about it. We are servants of the God of heaven and earth. We're rebuilding his temple because our forefathers disobeyed him. And the Lord God sent Nebuchadnezzar to destroy the temple, to discipline us. They knew that's why it had happened. But now God was merciful and had sent them back, that King Cyrus had given permission years ago for its rebuilding. Well, those who opposed him said, that's not true. It was true. That's not true. False accusations out there, all trumped up. So what happens? What happens? They're ordered to stop. False accusations. Well, the opposition says, that's not true. Go look in the royal archives. So they do. And guess what happens? When they do that, I forget which king it is here. Darius, he sees, he goes, oh, Cyrus did do that. So follow. I want you to see how God turns evil for good. I mean, they're false accusations, discouragement to them. They're like stuck. They can't do anything. They're counting on God's faithfulness. When Darius goes and looks at it, he finds, oh, Cyrus did issue this. Yeah, you guys can do it. Do you need some money? Do you want some help? He funds the project. Better than that. Not only does he fund the project, he gets the opposition. He says, if anybody tries to oppose this or change the edict, may a beam be taken from his house and impale him with it. That's pretty scary. That's pretty frightening. Impale him with it. That's protection. What Satan meant for evil, God turned for good. Does he not do that in our lives? All the time. All the time. Just in this story, they actually recognized that they turned away from God. This is the moment when they're coming back to him. They're confessing. They really are. But they can't open this closed door. They can't do it. They ask him, and God does it for them, which gives glory to God. So we read in chapter 6, verse 14, so the elders of the Jews, they built and prospered through the prophesying of Haggai and Zechariah. They finished their building by decree of God and a decree of these three kings, Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes. God did it through these men. In verse 22, they kept the feast of the unleavened bread 7 days with joy, for the Lord had made them joyful. And it's God who turned the heart of the king of Assyria to them. Friends, what can't God do? What can he do? It's about a 50-year break or more between chapters 6 and 7. That's when the book of Esther happens. Then in chapter 7, we see Ezra, who's being sent back to the people. So Ezra's writing this. So he tells the history before he gets there. Now he's going in chapter 7. This is interesting. The king sends Ezra back with a specific mission. What's Ezra? He's a scribe of the law. So he knows. So again, okay, we have Bibles in our hands. There's like scrolls that you can't carry around. They're stored someplace. But he had studied them. He knew them. It's the king who sends him back to teach the people. Really interesting. To teach them of God's laws. The king's not necessarily following. He sends him back there to do it. So chapter 7, end of verse 9 and 10, he says, for the good hand of God was on him, for Ezra had set his heart, look at these three words, to study the law of the Lord and to do it and to teach his statutes and rules in Israel. I love that. That man, if you could put that on somebody's tombstone, that's Ezra's. That was, his heart was set on, I'm going to study this. I'm going to obey it myself. I'm going to follow it. And to teach God's people. That's what he did. Some of you know that this is the 500-year anniversary of the Protestant Reformation, which we'll probably celebrate in some way at the end of this month. That kind of thing, that was a turning point in terms of history. It's amazing. It was the discovery of God's word, of the gospel in it. People didn't have it accessible. They didn't have it. And it was transformational in European society and eventually the world in terms of what took place. So this is 50 years now when Ezra goes back after that first group was sent. And here's what we find. It's kind of sad. 50 years later, but that first group that went, all the religious leaders had disregarded God's commands. How can you do that when God's sending you back? They had. And here's what they're doing. So I got to explain this because this is just like the period of the judges and the later kings. They were intermarrying with those other nations, which is about what? It's not about a racial thing. Racial intermarriage is not forbidden in Scripture. I say that really strongly because some time ago that was said from the Bible. That is not what this is. These marriages were people who worshiped demons. So when you hear they worship other gods or idols, use gods in small g, these are spirits. And you can read it. It doesn't say it every single time, but it says it throughout the Bible. This is the type of worship that it was. Okay? They were worshiping demons, which included temple prostitutes. It included child prostitutes. There were male prostitutes. There were women prostitutes. In some of those demon gods, they sacrificed. They made their children get burned in the fire. That's what they did. So this is not just like, people read that and they go like it's something about these race. It's not about the race. It's about the mixing of religion. It's not really. This is a cult-ic. It's demon gods. And that's what they'd done. Well, Ezra's back there. When he sees this, when he comes, he's appalled. It's what they've done before, what their forefathers had done. It's the exact reason why they're in captivity. What are we to do? I'm going to read 9:9. This is Ezra. For we are slaves, yet our God has not forsaken us in our slavery, but he's extended to us his steadfast love before the kings of Persia, to grant this some reviving, to set up the house of our God, to repair its ruins and give us protection. He can't believe what they've done. And he says, yet God's been faithful to us. What are we doing? He's broken by it. Chapter 10, verse 1, we see this. He personally is broken. While Ezra prayed, and he made confession, weeping, casting himself down before the house of God. That's what he's doing. The people gather around him. A very great assembly of men and women, children gathered to him out of Israel, for the people wept bitterly. The guy's broken. He sees the sin in the people. He can't believe it. He's genuinely broken. And as he is so, he's a man of character. The people see it. They come weeping also. What have we done? And that, what the next chapters tell is Ezra leading the people back to God. They put away their evil practices. They repent of it. So I think repentance is this simply. First, it starts with a recognition. I see the wrong that I've done. Confession is agreeing with God about it. It's not hiding. It's just call it. Let's call it what it is, and you say it. Asking God's forgiveness, which comes in Jesus. Okay, all of our sins. It comes in Jesus, and then it's a turning from it. This thing that I see, I want to turn from it. That's repentance. I'm turning. It's a thing that God does within, but it's demonstrated in real things. So Nehemiah, it ends with that kind of response. It's a wonderful thing. It's a difficult thing to turn away, isn't it? It's difficult. Okay, book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah is about 13 years later. You can see similar themes of the people's turning away, God's steadfast commitment to demonstrate his love, and what happens. So this is that story told through a very real person. They're going to experience opposition, but here's what I want you to see in Nehemiah. I think in him as a person, so this whole phrase of people meant for God, you're going to see that lived out. That Nehemiah knows that he's meant for God. He knows that we're meant for God. And you're going to see it with risk. You're going to see it in response. You're going to see it in faith. You're going to see it in a few crazy things that he does. So Nehemiah himself was an exiled Jew. He's serving in the Persian Empire. It's just interesting to me when you read the scriptures, how many of God's people he puts in key places? And they're under. So Nehemiah's job, vocation, anybody know? Who said it? Say it again. My wife would know that because we're reading the same text, okay. You can't speak in those. I'm just kidding. He's a cupbearer of the king. Big deal? Yeah, he carries the juice cup. That's a big deal. He's carrying the cup the king would carry. Why is that a big deal? Well, if you want to get rid of the king, you're not walking into the throne room with the sword because he's got all these guards here. What you want to do is be sneaky. You want to poison the thing he's drinking, right? So the cupbearer was a very trusted position. This guy's making sure what the king's going to consume, it's good. He's probably tested it himself, okay? He is a very, very trusted person. That's his job. So here's what happens. I'll read, this is chapter 1 in Nehemiah. I'll read verses 2 through 6. So I'm trying to alternate you guys back and forth between telling and reading so you can do this yourself. He gets a report from Hananiah, one of his brothers, came with certain men from Judah. I asked them concerning the Jews who had escaped, who had survived the exile, and concerning Jerusalem. So again, he's outside. He's 700 miles away. He's never been to Jerusalem. Hey, what's going on, you guys? How's it going there? He knows about the temple being rebuilt. They said to me, the remnant there in the province who survived the exile, they're in great shame. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates are destroyed by fire. What's his response? What does Nehemiah do? This report that he hears leads Nehemiah to pray, and it's a particular kind of prayer. Look at it. As soon as I heard these words, I sat down and I wept and I mourned for days, and I continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven. And I said, O Lord of God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments, let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer of your servants, that I now pray before you day and night for the people of Israel, your servants, confessing the sins of the people of Israel, which we've sinned against you. even I and my Father's house have sinned. So just note what he does there. He hears this bad report. Immediately he prays, but he recognizes it's a prayer of confession. He knows their history. He knows how often they've turned away. He's appealing to God in terms of God's character. That's instructive to us on how we pray. God, I know you're like this, and I know we've done this. He confesses it's his own sin, and that of the nation. So chapter 2, what we see is he's there before the king. The king notices that he's sad. He's not normally sad. He's been praying and fasting for days and days and days, confessing. So this guy had bags under his eyes. Doesn't matter. He's sad. So the king sees that. He asks him two questions. Why and what? Nehemiah, why are you sad? Nehemiah tells him about the report that happens, and he says, what do you want me to do? So what's Nehemiah do? What do you want me to do? King, we need help. If you can help us out, it'd be great. What does he do? What's he do? What's he do? Verse 4. I love this. So I prayed to the God of heaven. It's a quick prayer. Follow it this way. They're doing food for the meal, I bet you. I better go faster. Nehemiah, why are you sad? He tells him, what would you like me to do? That's when he prays. Follow it. Is he doing this? Hang on, king. Let me just take some time over here. What's that prayer? The king's asking him, why are you sad? He tells him, what do you want me to do? It's a breath. It's a quick prayer. It's not stepping aside. Why do I note that? Nehemiah is aware of God all the time. There's times in your life where something's going to happen. You can't plan for it. You don't know. It's going to come to you. What do you do right then? Oh, let me tell you the answer I think I want. When we walk with God, we're a people meant for God. There's an awareness of him all the time. Quick prayers are prayers. That indicates a dependence on God that we need. I think Nehemiah is kind of just living that out, that kind of a thing in his awareness. He knows he needs help, and it's God's help, so he prays. So here's what happened. King Artaxerxes sends Nehemiah back to build the wall of Jerusalem for the protection of God's people. He sends letters of endorsement with Nehemiah for safe passage all the way through, and actually grants him permission to get wood from the king's forest. So he says, and the king granted me what I asked for the good hand of God was upon me. Now, when Nehemiah arrives in Jerusalem, remember, he's never been there before. He knows what's going on with the people. He knows the opposition that's out there. So he takes a few trusted men, and he walks around the city wall, not telling anyone, inspecting it, looking at all the places of rubble. So in your mind, when you picture earthquake devastation and that's what it was, rubble. He's walking around thinking, how are we going to do this? What do we need to do? Then the next morning, he grabs the leaders and the workers, and he casts a vision for them of what they're going to do together, telling them of God's favor. So I'm going to read chapter 2, 17 to 20. Then I said to him, you see the trouble we're in and how Jerusalem lies in ruins with its gates burned. Come, let us build the wall of Jerusalem that we may no longer suffer derision. And I told them of the hand of my God that had been upon me for good, and also of the words that the king had spoken to me. And they said, let's rise up and build. So they strengthened their hands for the good work. He tells them what God had done. They rally around. And then verse 19, there's a but. But when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite servant and Geshem the Arab heard of it, they jeered at us and despised us and said, what's this thing that you're doing? Are you rebelling against the king? Then I replied to them, the God of heaven will make us prosper. We as servants will arise and build, but you have no portion or right to claim in Jerusalem. So follow this, what's going on. I'm going to tie this into another narrative, but he's rallying the leaders, saying this is what God's done. Let's do this together. They say yes. The oppositions are just jeering at him. And what Nehemiah responds back with is in confidence of God. He's got trust in God. Okay, friends, this is an impossible task before him. The people are beat down. They haven't been following the Lord. It's the walls of this entire city, Jerusalem. But he rallies those leaders. He knows what God has done. Chapter 3 lists all the teams of workers that are around the gates. Chapter 4, the opposition implies two strategies. One of them, it's just ridicule. Again, so these guys have been living in these conditions for 100 years. So they can't imagine doing this. So if you've ever been, inner city. People live in inner city conditions sometimes. It's so broken down, that's all the life they know. How do you change that? That's the Jewish people then. It's so broken down. So Nehemiah could come in. He's from Babylon. He's from the king's court. You're one of those guys. It could be like that. How are they going to do this? And so as they start building, they're trusting. He's talking about God, what God will do. They start building. And so now Sanballat comes up to the guys, and they just start making fun of them as they're building. Oh, if a fox would lean against the wall, it would fall over. Do you think those rocks are going to make any difference and keep people? They're just mocking them. Then they resort to another tactic. Oh no, mocking them. Where are we? 4:4-6. I got to read this. I love this. So they're mocking him. So what do you think Nehemiah does? You guys shut up. Don't listen to him. Is that what he does? What's Nehemiah do? What's he do? Nehemiah prays. What's he do when the king says, what do you want? He prays. What's he do when this opposition's coming up? He comes and he prays. Verse 4. Hear, O our God, for we're despised. Turn back their taunt on their own heads. Give them up to be plundered in a land where they're captives. Don't forgive their guilt. He just goes on. He prays and asks God for help and intervention. Verse 6, so we built the wall, and all the wall was joined together, half its height, for the people had a mind to the work. Here's what I want you to see. Nehemiah, whatever he experienced, he prays and he perseveres. He prays and he perseveres. And he's trusting God, not him. He's trusting God. So their first opposition is ridicule. Verse 8, we say, their opposition, they know that's not going to stop them. So you know what they do? They basically gather a group of marauders who are going to fight the guys building up the wall of the city. They're going to do it at night, or they're going to do it in person. So they have it. They have a plot to come against them with weapons. So what do you think Nehemiah does? That's what he does. Look at verse 9. And when he heard, and we prayed to our God, and we set a guard as a protection against them day and night. We prayed, and then we set a guard. Prayed and persevered. So Nehemiah knows this task is too big for anyone. So he stationed guards all around the low parts of the temple. He seeks the Lord and encourages the people in God together. Verse 14, do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight for your families. Don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, fight for your families. Verse 15, and when our enemies heard that it was known to us and that God had frustrated their plan. I love it. He's always talking about God. Always talking about what God did. We all returned to the wall, each to his work, and from that day on, half of my servants worked on construction, half held their spears. He adjusted the plan. Half work, half protect. But pretty much, verse 5 is a little bit of an interlude. I'll just tell you this part quickly. Nehemiah is the governor. As the governor, here's what he recognizes. So the Jewish people that had lived there for 100 years were the poor ones. The other ones, the leaders, had been taken away to Babylon. They got nothing. But those who governed them taxed them, so they remained in their poverty. Nehemiah is now the governor. We see a heart of generosity. I think we see the heart of Christ in Nehemiah in chapter 5. He revokes their taxes. He himself, as the governor, is entitled to a food stipend, which basically comes from the people. He says, I don't need that either. He's gracious. He's generous. He gives it up. And when I read that in chapter 5, you know what I think of? I think of Jesus Consider what Jesus gave up, what he left to come to us. All his prerogatives in heaven. He knew what he's getting into. He knew the suffering. He knew the betrayal. But what he knew was that when he's on the cross, he's going to experience the just wrath of God for our sin. The one time in his life when he doesn't call God Father. He says, my God, why have you forsaken me? Think of it this way. What if Jesus didn't do that? He gave up that for us. That remembrance should drive everything in our life. Too often we hold on to things, we build our life around other things. When Jesus is center, when we see what he's done, we want to live in that way. We're captured by him. There's aspects in Nehemiah in chapter 5 that remind me of Jesus. In chapter 6, the opposition continues. There's false accusations against Nehemiah personally, trying to make him afraid. So what's he do? He prays. And he perseveres. And here's what we read in verses 15 and 16. So the wall was finished on the 25th day of the month of Elul in 52 days. 52 days. Okay, hang on a second. You got to think about this. How many of you, no matter how big or how small, how many of you ever been on a construction project that you've seen, no matter how big or how small, that's been done in 52 days? Ever in your life? Ever. Your bathroom? Never. This is the wall of a city. It's done in 52 days. That's God. They know it. Against opposition. All kinds of opposition. It's to protect the people. The people are experiencing God as they go into that. So you just read through the details, 52 days. 52 days. And when all our enemies heard of it, all the nations around us were afraid and fell greatly in their own esteem, for they perceived that this work had been accomplished with the help of our God. You bet. Everybody knew it. Look what God had done. Look what he did. There's a man who prayed, and he persevered. And he's trusting what? God who keeps his promises. God who's steadfast in his love. Steadfast in his love. I'm going to end there, but the book closes out. Ezra comes in on the scene, and Ezra again leads the people back to God. In 13 years, they'd strayed away. And it's just interesting. When it gets to the end, their leaders sign a document with God. We're yours. And God didn't need them to sign it. They signed it indicating the seriousness of that for them. Here's what I want you to see. So thanks. That was a lot to cover. It's 100 years. But here's one thing. That was a really dark period in Israel's history. Rubble, temple destroyed, the people have been rebellious. Look what God did. God does that. He's faithful. He's all along the way, he's raising up people. He does that with Daniel. Daniel's parents had probably been killed. He does that with Nehemiah, also probably the same kind of thing, to be serving their royal. He does that with Esther for such a time as this. So, I don't know why you're here, but I'll tell you this. This is what I do know. God brought you here. I don't know why you're here or why you think you're here. God brought you here. I want you to know that this church, it's open. This is not about me. It's not about a building. This is about Jesus Christ and what he wants to do in us and what he will do in us. It's not about our greatness or our goodness because we got none of it. It's about his. And I believe, so if you want to take any of those pictures, God's done some incredible things in our few 5 years. But it's just beginning. I am certain there's way more next. So some of you have come in along the way in these 5 years. There's way more next. So we're closing prayer. I think we'll have the offering will go around. There's connect cards and all that. But I'm going to say this right now. I'd love it if you can stay for lunch. I think they're going to have it set up right away. It's not going to be long. But we're going to do a couple things in those moments. And you'll only hear it this time in this way. We're going to just remember together. Here's what God did here. I'm remembering obstacles as difficult. Hang on. Okay. Do you remember when we were doing Lakeview? Anybody? Jim Kramer. and they shut it down? Do you remember when the city shut it down? And God moved us to a stinking hot dog stand? And 100 people show up. I'm like, what are you doing, Lord? Do you remember when this is all on tape. Oh, well, it's true. When the school said, we have this lease, it's a year-long lease, and before they signed it, they changed it. You can only be in here for 3 months. That's all you get? Like, we're going like, should we not do that? God, we thought, what do we? And God gave favor, and we were able to stay. And you know what that did? That made us look for a building. And then God gave it. Then we had all this opposition about building. I'm like, I have no faith. I'm not a faith guy. I'm like, God, we can't afford it. We're just starting. How can we do this? We moved in here 2.5 years ago, debt-free. How does that happen? I don't know, except for God. There's so many things. So we're going to talk about just those things, a couple of them, and what's ahead. I believe, because of God and his greatness, what he wants to do in the city. A couple of us were at a memorial service yesterday, and there's some people here, Dave and Don, Jeff and Sandy were there, some others. But there's ways that you live embedded in people's lives that are they need the Lord, and you live that. That's how it happens. As we live as God's people, affected by the God, we just live. We just live. We live out of that and give out of that. And I believe God's going to do something much more for his glory. And you're part of that. That's what I want you to know. You are part of that as we submit ourselves to him. That's what a church is. We're not great. He is. Right? He is. Let's pray. God, thank you. Thank you for this word. Help all of us to receive it as you intend, whatever that is. And Lord, again, I just want to pray this one out loud for us as a people. There's so many things that we've not done right or well. Right now, God, we're just asking in submission of ourselves to you, that you would take us as yours and use us in ways we don't see, and that it would not be about